In mythology, Odin is often remembered as the All-Father, the one-eyed god who reigns over Asgard with an iron grip and a calculating mind. To the Norse, he was both revered and feared, a figure of paradoxes, seeker of wisdom yet ruthless in its pursuit, protector of his realm yet destroyer when it served his ends. Unlike the clear-cut gods of other traditions, Odin was not simply good or evil. He was a figure of duality, embodying both creation and manipulation, wisdom and deception. In the world of God of War, this duality is brought to life in a way that feels strikingly human. Odin is not portrayed as a distant deity carved in stone but as a man of flesh, paranoia, and cunning. He is a father, a ruler, a manipulator, and above all, a survivor. His charm lies not in brute strength, but in his ability to bend people and situations to his will. Unlike Kratos, whose power comes from raw force and unyielding will, Odin's true weapon is persuasion, subtlety, and control. His mythology provides the roots for this portrayal. In the Old Norse sagas, Odin was known for his endless hunger for knowledge. He sacrificed his own eye at Mimir's well in exchange for wisdom, a symbolic act that shows us how far he would go to gain even the slightest advantage. He would hang himself upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, in a ritual of self-death and rebirth to uncover the runes of power. Odin's greatness was always tied to his willingness to pay the highest price for control, knowledge, and survival. But woven into those myths is also a darker theme, wisdom weaponized not for compassion, but for dominance. In God of War Ragnarok, this side of Odin is fully realized. He is not the wise old sage the myths sometimes paint, but the manipulative puppeteer, weaving lies with the softness of a whisper. His charisma masks his insecurity. His promises of peace conceal a hunger for control. Every alliance, every word, every act of kindness is layered with calculation. Odin embodies the god who cannot stop scheming, who cannot stop grasping for more, because underneath it all lies the gnawing fear of losing everything he has built. This makes Odin fascinating, because he is not simply a god. He is a mirror of humanity's most enduring traits, our hunger for control, our obsession with knowledge, our fear of mortality, and our willingness to manipulate to avoid facing our own fragility. To understand Odin is to understand the shadow that lingers in ambition, the cost of wisdom when pursued without morality, and the way fear shapes power. That is the stage. Odin is not just a character in a myth or a video game. He is a portrait of the manipulator, the controller, the one who cloaks fear in the mask of dominance. And in the next part, we'll strip away that mask, looking deeper into the psychology and philosophy of Odin, what drives him, what his manipulation reveals about human nature, and why his story is as much ours as it is his. To understand Odin, you have to understand fear. At the heart of every manipulator lies a deep, unshakable insecurity. For Odin, it is the knowledge of his own mortality, the looming prophecy of Ragnarok, and the sense that no matter how much power or wisdom he amasses, it will never be enough to escape fate. His entire psychology is rooted in this paradox. He is the most powerful god in the Norse pantheon, yet he is also the most desperate. This desperation breeds manipulation. In modern psychology, we would call Odin's tactics Machiavellian. He embodies the personality triad psychologists often warn about: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. He is narcissistic in his self-importance and need for reverence, Machiavellian in his cunning strategies and deceit, and psychopathic in his cold detachment from the suffering of others. But unlike a caricatured villain, Odin cloaks these traits beneath charm and reason. He convinces others that what he wants is what they need. He rarely forces compliance outright, instead planting seeds of doubt, trust, or desire until the other person convinces themselves to bend to his will. What makes Odin dangerous is not his power, but his subtlety. In philosophy, this ties to the concept of persuasive power versus coercive power. Kratos represents coercive power, the ability to destroy, to overwhelm, to impose through sheer force. Odin represents persuasive power, the ability to redirect people without them even realizing it. The philosopher Michel Foucault argued that the most effective power is not the kind that punishes openly, but the kind that reshapes behavior invisibly, until people discipline themselves in service of another's goals. This is Odin in a nutshell. His rule is not maintained by fear of his hammer, but by the way he controls narratives, shapes beliefs, and redefines reality to suit his agenda. Psychologically, Odin also embodies what we might call the paranoid controller. He is always watching, always listening, always suspicious. In God of War Ragnarok, his paranoia seeps into everything, from his obsession with Loki to his fear of betrayal by his own family. This reveals something profoundly human. Manipulators often crave control not because they enjoy domination, but because uncertainty terrifies them. Every free will outside of their grasp feels like a potential threat. In relationships, this shows up as possessiveness, gaslighting, or subtle guilt tripping, all tactics meant to shrink the unpredictability of others. For Odin, the entire cosmos becomes his dysfunctional relationship. But philosophy shows us the tragedy of this way of being. The Stoics argued that control is an illusion. You cannot master fate, only your response to it. Odin, by refusing to accept this, becomes enslaved to the very thing he fears. His manipulation is not freedom, but bondage. The more he seeks to control, the less secure he becomes. The tighter his grip, the more his world slips through his fingers. His story is the story of the manipulator's curse, to win everything and yet feel safe with nothing. This is why Odin resonates. Because at some level, we all understand his psychology. Who hasn't tried to shape a situation to avoid pain? Who hasn't bent the truth, withheld information, or maneuvered someone into a choice out of fear of rejection, failure, or loss? Odin is that instinct magnified, weaponized, and unchecked. His mythology and his role in God of War show us not just a god at war with fate, but a man at war with himself. When you strip away the cloak of myth, Odin looks less like a god and more like people we know. The manipulative parent who wraps control in the language of love. The overbearing boss who frames exploitation as opportunity. The partner who makes you feel guilty for wanting independence. These figures rarely shout or threaten outright. Instead, they use charm, guilt, fear, and persuasion to bind others to them. Odin is their reflection on a mythic scale. Modern psychology tells us that manipulation is usually born from insecurity, not strength. Just as Odin fears Ragnarok, manipulators fear abandonment, betrayal, or irrelevance. They believe that if they don't control others, they will be powerless. This mindset creates what's called a cycle of control. The more insecure they feel, the more they tighten their grip. The more they tighten their grip, the more others resist. That resistance fuels even greater insecurity, and the cycle deepens. Odin embodies this spiral perfectly. His paranoia about fate only drives him to alienate the very people he needs most, his family, his allies, his children. Philosophically, Odin's story forces us to ask, what is the cost of control? The Greek philosopher Heraclitus once said, the more you try to control the world, the more it controls you. Odin's obsession with preventing Ragnarok is a case study in this truth. By trying to dominate destiny, he becomes a slave to it. His manipulation doesn't grant freedom, it shackles him to an endless fight he cannot win. In this way, Odin is less a king of gods and more a prisoner of his own fear. In our own lives, the same trap appears in subtler ways. A manager micromanages because they don't trust their team. A friend withholds honesty because they fear confrontation. A parent tries to shape a child's identity because they can't handle the uncertainty of who that child might become. These behaviors, like Odin's, come from fear disguised as wisdom. They erode trust, distance relationships, and often create the very outcome the manipulator hoped to avoid. What makes Odin's lesson so powerful is how it forces us to see the humanity in manipulation. We often paint manipulators as villains, and certainly their actions can be destructive. But beneath the surface lies something deeply human, the fear of loss, of insignificance, of being at the mercy of forces beyond control. Odin teaches us that manipulation is not just cruelty, but desperation. It is the last resort of someone who cannot sit with uncertainty. This brings us back to a truth the Stoics lived by: we cannot control fate, only our response to it. The tragedy of Odin is that he never learned this. Instead of accepting what he could not change, he tried to bend the universe to his will, and in doing so, he destroyed himself and those around him. Odin's story is a mirror that forces us to confront our own relationship with control, fear, and power. On the surface, he is a god chasing mastery over fate, but beneath that mask he is a man consumed by the terror of uncertainty. His tragedy is not that he fought against destiny, but that he never realized the fight itself was unwinnable. He clung so tightly to control that it slipped through his hands, leaving him alone, mistrusted, and undone. The lesson here is uncomfortable but liberating. Control is an illusion. The more we chase it, the more it escapes us. In trying to bend life to our will, we often end up breaking ourselves. Odin's manipulations, like the subtle manipulations we see in real life, are not signs of strength but of weakness, of fear dressed up as wisdom. To live like Odin is to live in chains, even if those chains are made of gold and power. Psychologically, this challenges us to look inward. Where do we manipulate instead of trust? Where do we cling to control instead of accepting uncertainty? Every time we push someone with guilt, hide the truth to avoid conflict, or overplan because we cannot face the unknown, we step a little closer to Odin's prison. Philosophically, Odin reminds us of the Stoic principle: focus only on what you can control, your actions, your choices, your character. Fate, death, betrayal, loss, these lie outside your grasp. To accept this is not defeat, it is freedom. Unlike Odin, we do not need to fight fate to find peace. We need only to stop fighting what cannot be fought. And so, Odin's downfall becomes a strange kind of gift. It shows us what happens when fear of uncertainty governs a life. It warns us that manipulation corrodes trust and that the hunger for power eats the soul from the inside out. But it also whispers a path forward, to let go, to live with uncertainty, to choose integrity over control. In the end, Odin is not just the villain of God of War. He is the embodiment of every human being who has ever tried to outsmart the inevitable. His story reminds us that wisdom does not come from bending the universe to our will, but from aligning ourselves with what cannot be bent. And maybe that's the ultimate paradox: Odin, the god of wisdom, is undone by the one lesson he never learned.